Before the counting of winters and before the first songs of the people, the world hung between water and sky like a thought waiting to be spoken. On that wide, silent stage, figures moved whose deeds would become the bones of story for generations to come. They were shapers of sun and season, tricksters who stole fire, hunters who brought corn and game, peacemakers who braided nations into a single living cord. These were not mere mortals, nor only gods. They were the great actors of native North American lore, beings who crossed thresholds between human and divine, mischief and mercy, destruction and gift. The tales that follow do not set these figures in tidy chapters, but let them pass like a single braided river. One narrative current carrying Raven and Coyote, Nanabozho and Glooscap, Monster Slayer and Born for Water, Kanati and Selu, the White Buffalo Calf Woman, and Hiawatha. Their feats, stolen lights and tamed storms, monster hunts and sacred teachings, shape the earth and the people who live upon it. A measured and necessary note before the telling. These stories belong to many nations across the continent. Each name, each telling, carries the weight of place, language, and ceremony. What is offered here is a weaving of motifs and voices, an attempt to hold in one narration many songs that, in their origins, were sung by different peoples. They are presented with respect and with recognition that every performance is a part of living tradition. Raven came first to the edge of an island where the world was still a secret held in closed hands. He drifted on the wind as if the wind were his cloak, a black feathered shape that laughed at silence and pecked curiously at closed things. In the beginning, Raven was small and clever. Everything that was hidden teased his beak. He found the house where a proud being kept the sun, the moon, and the stars tucked away like bright seeds. The house sat like a compact secret on the island, its eaves humming with a warmth that was not yet shared. Raven watched the bright things through narrow cracks. His heart beat with mischief that would make a world. Raven took on 1,000 disguises. He walked in as an old man, one shoulder bowed, voice soft with supplication. He came as a beggar whose hands shook with need. He came as a friend who hummed an easy tune. He waited through long nights, learning the rhythms of the house, watching the keeper of the lights in moments of trust. At the moment of greatest trust, when a hand reached into a box and the lamps of the sky lay gentle and unguarded, Raven's beak struck. He plucked a glowing ember from the fire, and then, bold beyond measure, he snatched the golden globe itself and lifted it into the open. He flew high, higher than the tallest cedar, and released the light. The sun rose and scorched the black from his shoulders. In carving the sky, he made day and night and left the world with a way to measure time. The first dawn was a folly and a gift. Where his talons struck sparks into stones, mortals learned to coax flame. Where his feathers fell into rivers, streams found shape. Raven's laughter and his theft set in motion the rhythm of mornings and nights. And from that theft, the people found their path from shadow into working life. But the theft was not without consequence. Raven flew lighter and smaller because the sun's heat had singed him. He learned that a trick that changes the world places a new weight upon the trickster. The keeper of the lights, robbed and shamed, remade the sky in ways that taught the world balance. The new order required measure. From Raven's boldness came ritual. The careful tending of flame, the making of dawn songs, the naming of days. Where Raven had opened what had been closed, the people created ways to hold the light and keep it safe. Raven's story is in its particular strain, a lesson that the release of a hidden thing may bring both danger and possibility. Raven would remain, in the many tellings, more than thief. He is the recall of curiosity's cost and reward. He is the one who reminds that without mischief, many necessary things would have remained unspoken. Yet he also reminds that mischief must be balanced by respect, for what is taken cannot always be given back without account. Far from the rain-slick shores where Raven plodded, on wind-swept plains and in the shadows of high mesas moved Coyote. Long-limbed, cunning, hungry for both delight and trouble. Coyote's mythology braided trickery with instruction. He was both the one who broke the rules and the teacher who revealed why those rules mattered. When the north nights came hard and the world froze, when breath hung like glass and people huddled beneath robes of seal and hide, Coyote went to the house of the spirits who kept the fire of the sky. The spirit keepers were watchful, their fires safe within a ring of rock and prayer. Coyote, with the lean hunger of survival and the greater hunger for a story, worked his tricks. He bribed with laughter. He lost himself in apparent foolishness that was never foolish. And at the right breath, he stole the coal, the flame, the secret warmth. He carried it home, hidden in a hollow bone or tied into his tail. And people felt the teeth of cold bite less sharply. Hearths were rekindled. Small children learned the comfort of steam over one's hands. In another telling, Coyote wrestled away the moon's many suns, great glowing discs that had been hurled loose across the sky to torment the earth, so that seasons could return and crops could be planted. He juggled and cajoled and sometimes hurt what he loved, for his cunning was a sharp blade with two edges. Coyote's blunders and cunning both created and warned. Once, in a long tale, Coyote sought to be greater than his kin. He captured a river to show his power and turned the water where it ought not to be. The land flooded, nests were lost, and a season's planting drowned. The people suffered, and only through humility and restoration did balance return. Coyote learned that appetite, untethered by care, becomes ruin. In other stories, his stolen light warmed the hearth. His jokes taught restraint. His unspent greed taught the cost of unbalanced appetite. Coyote's presence in the story is therefore paradoxical. He is the one who makes things happen through foolishness. But he is also the necessary foil, the example of what not to do. The elders speak of Coyote and then of the margin between laughter and sorrow. He reminds people that the line between cleverness and cruelty is thin, and that the same wit that opens a locked door can also leave a child outside. In the low marshes and birch-shadowed lakes lived Nanabozho, whose shape bent like reed in water, sometimes a hare's quick sprint, sometimes a man laughing by the fire, sometimes a raven's black eye. If Raven's art was theft and Coyote's art was transgression, Nanabozho's art was naming. Where Raven stole the brightness, Nanabozho walked and breathed names into the wind: elk, salmon, berry, medicine, bestowing on each creature and plant a place, a law, a story. When a great water rose and only a few survived, Nanabozho floated on a log and coaxed life anew from drowned seeds. He was a salvager of possibility. In the flood myth that washes through many lands, Nanabozho's patience anchored the remnant world. He listened to the small voice of a seed, and with coaxing and careful hands, he taught people how to coax life from imbalance. In other stories, he outwitted giants that menaced human habitations. He tricked and outsmarted those whose bellies were hunger and whose hands were too long. Each victory taught practical arts: how to fish, how to set a snare, how to read the weather. Nanabozho's laughter was not careless. It was the sound of a teacher who had learned to live within the world's imperfection and to pass that living down to the next generations. He taught, through story, that every creature has its law. Once, when a village began to take more than it gave, when fish were taken in ways that resembled greed rather than need, Nanabozho convened the animals. He asked each creature to speak of reciprocity. The salmon spoke of returning to the river to mate. The berries said that it would feed those who spread its seed. The deer said that it would offer itself, but only if honored. In the listening, the people learned restraint. Nanabozho's stories are, in their repeated telling, a set of living instructions. They are small moral alphabets, taught through mischief and survival. He embodies the quiet teaching that names are not merely labels, but bindings. To call a thing is to enter into relationship with it. Where mesas rise like islands in the sky, twin figures carve the desert with their steps. Monster slayer and born for water strode out from a home warmed by sacred hearths, sons of the sun who took up lightning and song as weapons. They moved through canyons like storms, tracking beings that were older than memory. Hideous, hunger-wrought monsters that sprang from under the earth to tear children from cradles and to devour travelers on lonely trails. Monster slayer loosed arrows that hummed with thunder, and born for water called deep wells to the surface. In the oldest parts of their story, the monsters are not merely beasts. They are perversions of the life order. Creatures who eat the warmth meant for children, who hoard spring and replace them with bone. The brothers did not simply seek to kill. They sought to unbind the forces that pulled the world toward want and terror. One by one, they found ravenous things that crawled in the dark, gnashing maws wrapped in the scales and hair. The twins used ritual and force in equal measure. They sang the names of their ancestors as they loosed arrows. They walked the sacred 7 steps before wading into a pool whose guardian had been turned to stone by greed. They combined cunning and prayer. Sometimes the killing was swift, and sometimes it required ceremony. They cut the monster's connection to the earth, bound it in words, and then released the sky's breath back to the plains. Each monster's fall was not only a killing, but an unbinding. Lakes reformed, paths cleared. The desert's harsh heart loosened into land where families could settle and gardens could take root. The brothers passed from valley to valley like a cleansing wind, and their names became the guarantee that the world could be made safe by courage and the right rights. Yet their work came at cost. In some tellings, the monsters were bound with the bones of the slain. The brothers' hands were stained, and each victory required mourning. The people who settled afterward would hold feasts of thanks and sing of those who gave their lives to hold back the night. Music and lament braided together. Monster slayer and born for water teach, in equal measure, that order is preserved by sacrifice, and that the line between protector and destroyer is often red with the same soil. To the east, in rivers that wound through old forests, Glooscap walked with broad hands and a patience that matched the drift of the tides. Where he set his foot, islands rose, and he sang to mountains until they agreed to be hills. Glooscap's magic was not only to command, but to instruct. His miracles were strands of social medicine, easing hunger, civilizing the unruly, and teaching that humor could be a remedy for despair. In one telling, he gathered all the animals into a river and taught the people that taking them away would starve the world of balance. He let the animals go, teaching restraint. In another, he bound a monstrous bird of tempest and then slackened the bonds just enough to let wind blow. teaching that power must be held and then released with wisdom. Glooscap battled his own shadow twin, bending the cruelty of the world back upon itself until order could be rethreaded. He taught the people practical arts. Where wildness had made rivers treacherous, he taught the building of fishways and the timing of nets. Where grief had made a village close on itself, he taught the practices of mourning that would return it to song. His hands shaped the flesh of the land and the manners of the people. His stories were at once stern and gentle, anchoring custom in wonder. Glooscap's interventions were organized as lessons. Once, when a man seized more than his need, Glooscap turned his house into a hollow and made him walk from room to room with nothing but his conscience. The man learned humility in emptiness. On another occasion, Glooscap sealed a chattering brook to teach that silence, too, has wisdom. These acts were not mere shows of power. They resembled the work of a teacher whose goal is lasting balance. Glooscap's authority, in all retellings, rests upon restraint. He shows that shaping the world is an ethical practice. The stories that bear his name are less about spectacle than about the craft of life, how to tend the soil, how to temper desire, how to hold a people's grief so that mourning transforms into memory. On hills of dark loam and under the hush of southeastern pines stood Kanati, the hunter whose luck seemed woven from the stars themselves, and Selu, corn woman whose body fed the people. Kanati's arrows never missed the mark. He came from the hunt with game enough to fill a longhouse. Selu bore a hidden miracle. She could rub her belly, make a circle with her hand, and from that motion, corn and beans and squash spilled into baskets like a blessing made visible. Their story is, at root, an intimate and consequential tale about reciprocity. When jealousy and foolish curiosity drove others to harm Selu, to pry into the mystery that made her a vessel of abundance, the community's relationship with food altered forever. Selu's death, in the telling most widely known, was violent and tragic. Her last words were a command and a gift. Drag her body in a measured circle, and from the spun soil the first corn would sprout. Even in the violence of that story, the theft that made her die, Selu's blood and bone turned to nourishment. From that origin grew the cycles of planting and harvest, ritual, toil, and the knowledge that food is not merely taken, but received through reciprocity and care. Kanati's hunt taught the people skill and endurance. Selu's body taught them how to honor the soil and to treat food as sacred covenant. Kanati, who survived Selu's death, learned that the hunt must be accompanied by ritual. He taught seasons and taboos, the times when deer might be taken and when they must be left. He showed how to give thanks at the kill, how to ensure the spirit of the hunted was honored and returned. Kanati and Selu's joint legacy is a lesson in balance. Food requires both taking and giving back. The tale of Kanati and Selu also bears another caution. It shows how greed and curiosity can violate the most tender forms of abundance. But it also shows renewal. From harm can come teaching, and from death can arise a ritual that keeps people mindful of their dependence on one another and on the land. In a prairie of whispering grasses and rolling thunderclouds, the white buffalo calf woman walked into camp, carrying a small bundle and a pipe. Her feet were quiet as a vow. When some of the men saw her, they fell back in fear, for she was unlike any woman they had seen. Her presence was both near and otherworldly. Others drew near in reverence. She opened her bundle and showed a red-stemmed pipe carved with a calf. She taught a ceremony whose smoke would make the heart ready for counsel. She spoke of a way of peace. Smoke first in council, smoke in times of treaty, smoke to invite the great above into the circle. She taught dances and songs for times of both drought and plenty. When she rose and walked northward, the people saw her change. Black buffalo, brown buffalo, red buffalo, and finally the pure white calf. Each transformation a promise that the world would be renewed. Her gift was neither weapon nor trophy, but a covenant that the people and the buffalo, the hearth and the hunt, the small pipe and the big sky are bound. She brought a law of reciprocity, teaching that animals and people trade in more than meat and hide. They trade in respect and song. Through her teaching, the plains learned that power could be made gentle and that ceremony could make thought live in the bones. The pipe itself, as object and symbol, is a thread that holds the community's covenants. It is not a prop, but a living mnemonic. When the people smoke together, they create a place where individual will is tempered by communal hearing. In many tellings, the white buffalo calf woman's return, or the promise of her return, functions as a moral barometer. When people forget the pipe's teachings, hard times come. When they tend the covenant, abundance returns. Her story is therefore both instruction and promise. It shows that peace is a practiced ritual, and that ceremony is not superstition, but a technology of belonging. In longhouses and council places, a different kind of hero moved. Hiawatha, whose hands combed both hair and hearts. He once crouched at the edge of a warm pot and intended a killing, a brutal ritual of old rage, until a reflection of the Peacemaker changed him. The meeting of Hiawatha and Dekanawida became a hinge in the world. Where before the nations had been riven by feud and petty tyrants, Hiawatha took a task that had the taste of impossible mercy. He climbed into a house where a twisted, fearsome leader held power and plucked from the man's head the serpents and knots that were the outward signs of inner darkness. Standing upon the roof and feeling fur slither between his fingers, Hiawatha plied a patience born of grief and turned malice into a straight spine. With the Peacemaker, he carried wampum and song across nation lines, binding rivals into council, teaching condolence that could turn the rawness of loss into social repair. He harnessed grief into law. His work was not the slaying of monsters, but the unmaking of hatred. He braided together ceremony and reason until a living polity rose that could hold peace. Hiawatha's labor was slow and relational. He traveled between houses of grief and kin, learning and teaching sorrow's language. He asked those who had killed to speak and those who had lost to be heard. In the spaces that he and his companion made, the work of grief moved outward, becoming a public craft rather than a hidden wound. The art of condolence, of naming what was lost and then letting that loss teach, became the mechanism of law. Through his patience and his songs, Hiawatha transformed not only individuals, but the shape of collective action. The stories that bear his name are injunctions. They show that the making of peace is not the satisfaction of power, but the disciplined cultivation of listening. These figures did not stand apart in tidy silos of story. Raven's stolen sunlight warmed Coyote's night hunts. Nanabozho's names taught the hunters that Kanati embodied. Glooscap and Hiawatha both used sovereign powers, one to shape land, the other to shape law, to keep the world inhabitable and human. The brothers who slew monsters made safe the trails by which the white buffalo calf woman's people might travel to meet one another. Each tale loops into the next like a bead on a string. where Selu's seed broke open, Nanabozho's naming breath might be heard. Where Coyote's folly birthed a lesson, Raven's bright theft showed how to transform want into resource. At times, the heroes crossed in conflict, and at times in council. Coyote's foolishness once provoked a long night of hardship that only Monster Slayer's swift, thunderous arrows could undo. Raven's mischief unlatched waters that threatened a village, and Glooscap walked the shore to bind the flood back into riverbeds. Hiawatha's songs were carried on winds that even the white buffalo calf woman honored. For the pipe's smoke made councils ready to hear the truth he carried. In the heat of desert fights, born for water shaped oases into wells where Kanati could draw for his people. Each action was a strand. Together, they formed the braided rope that kept the world from unmaking. There were darker threads, for heroism here is no simple brightness. Some deeds required hard unmaking. Monsters killed, witches thwarted, promises broken to save the whole. In those instances, the heroes bore the weight. Glooscap wrestled and bound those who would slough into cruelty. Hiawatha plucked the serpents of madness from a chief's mind, even as his own heart held grief for what had been lost. Selu's murder pledged corn, yet left an ache that became ritual remembrance. Even Coyote's trickery, sometimes leading to ruin, taught laws by negative example. The story of his excess warns the listener of boundaries not to cross. Each tale wound consequence into instruction, and the people who told them understood that the same hand that brings fire may also scorch the child who draws too close. Through their feats, the world took shape. Raven's theft of light made day and night. Nanabozho's naming breathed order into the wild. Monster Slayer's arrows cleared the trails. Born for water's wells fed the tired. Glooscap's song stilled storms and taught moderation. Kanati and Selu knit food and hunt into the table of life. The white buffalo calf woman taught peace by the soft smoke of ceremony. Hiawatha braided rivals into a single council. Coyote, roving between joke and lesson, kept the human heart honest, never allowing the people to forget how thin the line could be between luck and ruin. Together, they became a mythic chorus that explained the how and why of living, how fire came to hearth, how corn came to field, how law came to govern, and how laughter could both save and destroy. These stories are not relics locked in glass. They are living chords of memory told by elders, whispered into the ears of children, reshaped by each speaker to fit the need of the day. The great heroes of native North American mythology are embodiments of the world's first questions and first answers. Their feats are not simple bragging. They are the grammar of survival, the metaphors of ceremony, the bitter and sweet medicine that teaches balance. There are moments in these tales that demand ceremony precisely because they are liminal, thresholds between what was and what will be. Raven's theft is a passage from darkness to time. Nanabozho, floating on a log, is a moment between ruin and renewal. Selu's death is the boundary between wild abundance and cultivated, ritualized provision. These threshold moments teach two things. First, that change often requires sacrifice. Second, that those sacrifices are not private. They are held by the community through ritual. When Selu becomes corn, the cultivation of fields is forever bound to the memory of what was given. When Hiawatha turns hatred into a story told in council, the law becomes a memorial of what might otherwise have been endless blood. The consequence of these teachings is a practice. Live so that the world endures. Do not hunger for more than is given. Speak with ceremony when a people must be gathered. teach children the songs that make the night manageable. These are the practical outcomes of myth. No mythology that teaches how to live is without harsh lessons. The trickster's excesses, the monster slayer's blood, the hunter's necessary kills, all these bring troubling images. But troubling images are often the very medium through which a people instruct themselves. The stories do not glorify suffering. They hold it up as necessary and instructive. In many of these tales, the community survives because someone pays. Glooscap binds cruelty, but also learns that every binding constrains someone's freedom. Hiawatha makes peace, but carries the weight of loss. Selu is killed to create an agricultural economy, and the ritual that arose from that death is both a mourning and a safeguard. Those who tell these tales attend to the ethical calculus that community life demands. These tales perform a social function as much as they entertain. They encode law and habit into images a child can hold, and they store cautionary tales in memorable forms. Raven's theft teaches cunning and its cost. Coyote's mischief teaches restraint by negative example. Nanabozho's naming teaches classification and duty. Monster Slayer's victories teach courage and ceremony. Glooscap's mentorship teaches moderation. Kanati and Selu teach reciprocity. White Buffalo Calf Woman and Hiawatha teach ceremony and peace. To listen to these stories is to take part in a technology of cohesion. Each tale encodes a solution to a practical problem. How to partition time, how to ensure food, how to govern grief, how to maintain balance with non-human kin. They are mnemonic devices and moral algorithms, passed by hearthlight, by smoke, by song. These stories are not finished. They are retold, altered, lamented, and renewed. As winters accumulate and young people move between worlds, the stories bend but do not break. An elder may tell of Raven to a city child who has never seen the cedar that first felt the thief's wings. The child will still understand the cost of mischief, the brightness of dawn. A council may still stand and smoke a pipe, as Hiawatha taught, even in a modern hall whose walls are electricity. The pipe is the same, and the breath is the same. To listen is to keep the world alive. To tell is to pass along a map, drawn in story, of how to live within the living earth. These stories are therefore both record and instruction. They teach not by abstraction, but by narrative. Concrete, textured, and human. The great heroes of native North American mythology, Raven and Coyote, Nanabozho and Glooscap, Monster Slayer and Born for Water, Kanati and Selu, the White Buffalo Calf Woman and Hiawatha, are embodiments of the world's first questions and first answers. Their feats are not simple bragging. They are the grammar of survival, the metaphors of ceremony, the bitter and sweet medicine that teaches balance. If the listener would carry one understanding from these stories, it is this. Myth is a form of care. It tends a people's memories so that the living have a language for the living world. It instructs how to give and how to receive, how to make law from grief, how to shape the land without breaking it, and how to listen when the wind might be a teacher. These are not the only tales, nor are these words the only voices that might be used to tell them. They are an offering, a careful weaving meant to honor the forms and functions of stories that have kept people steady for generations. To tell them is to hold them, and to hold them is to remember. You have walked with the heroes, the tricksters, and the peacemakers through story and time. If these voices stirred something in you, let that spark continue. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next telling. and leave a comment to share which figure's journey spoke to your heart. If this work felt meaningful, offer it forward, like, share, and help these stories travel to new ears. Until the next journey, keep listening, keep learning, and carry these stories with respect.